I came back home after 10 years only to discover the house my father left me now bore my uncle's name on the deed. He called me ungrateful when I confronted him until I showed them the paper clearly stating joint ownership with my signature from 2009. My stepfather's fist came at my face while I kept my camera rolling. But I didn't come here to argue. I brought the law, evidence, and a plan to strip every single card from their hands. My name is Elena Harper, and I'm 32 years old. After a decade working as a compliance investigator at Cascade Forensics Group in Seattle, I finally decided to return to Willow Ridge, Missouri. The small town hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same faded storefronts, same gossip traveling faster than broadband internet. But something was different about the house I grew up in. The mailbox caught my attention first. The peeling letters that once spelled Harper had been replaced with crisp vinyl decals reading Benton. My stepfather's name. I stood there in the drizzling rain, my rental car still running behind me, staring at this small but significant change. Dad had been dead for 11 years now. Mom remarried Troy Benton 8 years ago. But the house that was supposed to stay Harper property? Inside, more changes slapped me in the face. The wall that once displayed our family photos, Dad in his army uniform, me at high school graduation, Mom and Dad's wedding portrait now showcased Troy's deer heads and fishing trophies. The oak furniture Dad handcrafted in his workshop had vanished, replaced by cheap particle board pieces from some discount store. Even the smell was wrong. Instead of Mom's lavender potpourri and Dad's lingering woodworking oils, the place reeked of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Mom emerged from the kitchen, her face lighting up briefly before settling into that nervous expression I'd grown accustomed to during our video calls. Marlene Benton, née Harper, had always been conflict-averse, but these days she looked like a woman perpetually bracing for impact. "Elena, sweetheart, you should have called. I would have cleaned up better." She wrung her dish towel between her hands, glancing toward the back door where I could hear Troy's truck pulling in. My phone buzzed, a message from my assistant back in Seattle. 2010 mortgage records and conditional transfer clauses downloaded to your secure folder. I'd started pulling documents before I even boarded the plane. 10 years in forensic compliance teaches you to never walk into a situation blind. "Mom, I need to ask you something about the house papers," I began, but Troy's heavy footsteps cut me off. He filled the doorway 6 feet of unemployed construction worker with a beer gut that had expanded considerably since I'd last seen him. His bloodshot eyes narrowed at my presence. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence. Too good for your family all these years, and now you show up unannounced." I ignored him, keeping my focus on Mom. "I was reviewing some documents. The county tax ledger shows Mason's name on a property transfer from 18 months ago. Something about family authorization. Want to explain that?" Mom's face went pale. Troy stepped forward, his work boots leaving mud tracks on what used to be pristine hardwood floors my father had installed himself. "Your uncle's been helping us with paperwork. Not that it's any of your business, considering you abandoned this family." Abandoned. Rich words from a man who moved into my father's house and apparently conspired to steal it. I pulled out my phone, not to argue, but to photograph the deep scratches on the dining room doorframe, scratches from where Dad used to measure my height every birthday. Troy had obviously tried to sand them down, but failed. The marks were still visible, along with Dad's tiny penciled dates. "What the hell are you doing?" Troy demanded, moving closer. I kept photographing, my professional instincts kicking in. Document everything, create a trail, build your case. In forensic investigation, emotions are secondary to evidence, and evidence was what would burn their scheme to the ground. The rhythm of investigation had begun, and they had no idea what was coming. Dinner was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Troy had already downed half a bottle of whiskey by 6:30 p. His movements growing looser and more aggressive with each pour. Mom served overcooked meatloaf, the same meal she made when she didn't want to risk setting him off with something new. I pushed the gray meat around my plate, watching, waiting. So, Troy, I said, cutting into the silence. Interesting thing about property transfers. Missouri law requires dual-party consent when modifying ownership rights on inherited property, especially when there's a co-ownership clause. His fork clattered against his plate. What the hell are you talking about? The 2010 addendum, the one I signed as Dad's beneficiary while I was in college. Any changes to the property deed require my living signature, not a photocopy, not a notarized permission slip. My actual, verified signature. The slap came faster than I expected. Troy's meaty hand caught my left cheek, snapping my head sideways. The sting radiated through my jaw, but I'd been ready. My phone, propped against the napkin holder, captured everything: the sound of impact, his slurred cursing, Mom's sharp gasp. Troy. Mom cried out, but he was already standing, his chair scraping against the floor. You come into my house, eating my food, and dare question me. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat already building. Perfect. I turned slightly, ensuring the phone caught the red mark blooming across my face. Then I activated my legal app, speaking clearly. 7:43 p.m. October 2nd. Documenting domestic assault by Troy Benton. Visible injury to left facial area. Witness present: Marlene Benton. You little bitch! Troy lunged forward, but the front door opened, cutting him off. Mason Kincaid walked in like he owned the place, which, apparently, he thought he did. My uncle had aged badly in 10 years, his cheap suit unable to hide the soft middle of a man who preferred scheming over working. That practiced smile of his made my skin crawl. Elena, what a surprise. Nobody told me you were visiting. His eyes flicked to my reddening cheek, then to Troy. A silent conversation passing between them. Just discussing the house. Uncle Mason. You know, the one you're helping with. He smoothed his tie, that snake oil salesman charm oozing out. Just handling some paperwork to help your mom with maintenance loans. You know how expensive upkeep can be. Maintenance, I repeated, pulling up photos on my phone. Is that what you call a new garage? Because I have receipts here showing home equity line draws totaling $48,000. Funny thing is, the notary stamp on your power of attorney doesn't match up with the courthouse records. Mason's smile flickered. You're confused, sweetheart. These things are complicated. Patricia Henley, notary license number 4487. Her log shows she was in Florida the entire week of March 15th when you supposedly had these documents notarized. I called her this afternoon. The room went silent except for Troy's heavy breathing. I continued documenting, switching to video mode as I opened my laptop, displaying the evidence I'd compiled: bills of sale for Dad's tools, screenshots of Craigslist ads selling his military memorabilia, bank records showing regular cash deposits matching the amounts. You sold Dad's things, I said to Mom, who was crying silently, his Purple Heart, his service medals. The hand tools he collected for 40 years. We needed money, Troy slurred. Your precious daddy didn't leave us shit except this broken-down house. Broken down, I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. You mean the house you leveraged for a loan to build your garage, the one where you run your unlicensed auto shop. Mason stepped between us, hands raised in fake peace. Let's all calm down. Elena, you've been gone a long time. You don't understand the sacrifices. I understand fraud. I interrupted. I understand forged signatures and false notarization. I understand that you used a power of attorney that was never valid because it required my co-signature, which you never got. I stood, gathering my things with deliberate calm. I'm leaving now, but this isn't over. You have 24 hours to think about how you want this to end. Either we handle this privately with full restitution, or I file criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and theft. As I headed for the door, Troy grabbed my arm. I let him, angling my body so my phone captured his grip, the way his fingers dug in hard enough to leave marks. You ain't taking nothing from us. He snarled. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm taking back what was already mine, and you just added assault charges to the list. I pulled free and walked out, already forwarding the evidence package to Avery Sloane's law office. The old lawyer had been Grandpa's friend, and he'd been waiting for my call. The motel room I checked into smelled like industrial disinfectant, but it felt cleaner than that house. I had work to do. The investigation unfolded like a forensic timeline, each piece of evidence building a clear picture of systematic theft. I sat in my motel room at 2:15 a.m., laptop open, constructing the chronology with the same precision I used for corporate fraud cases. First entry: Dad's death certificate, January 2014. Second, Mason appearing as the helpful brother-in-law, handling estate paperwork while Mom grieved. Third, Mom's marriage to Troy, September 2016. Fourth, the first home equity line of credit application, May 2022, using a power of attorney that shouldn't have existed. The pattern was deliberate, calculated. They'd waited long enough for memories to fade, for grief to settle into vulnerability. My phone rang. Mrs. Whitaker, the neighbor who'd watched me grow up. Elena, honey, I'm so glad you called back. I kept those photos you asked about. That garage sale last year, I thought it was strange, selling all your daddy's things. I took pictures because some of those tools were antiques. I thought maybe your mom didn't know their value. She emailed me 37 photos. Dad's complete woodworking collection, his military shadow box, even the custom fishing rods he'd built himself all laid out on card tables with price tags that made me sick. A lifetime of craftsmanship sold for pennies on the dollar. Next call, Darius Cole, the master carpenter who'd worked with Dad on several projects. That termite damage story complete bullshit, Darius said bluntly. I inspected that house myself 6 months ago when Troy asked me to, wanted me to write up a fake damage report for insurance fraud. I refused and documented everything. That house is solid as the day your father built it. I'll testify to that. The evidence kept mounting. I cross-referenced every document, every date, every signature. Mason had been sloppy criminals usually are when they think their victims are powerless. At 8 a.m., I drove to Mom's workplace, the elementary school where she served as a lunch aide. I found her in the empty cafeteria, setting up for breakfast service. Mom, we need to talk without Troy around. She looked exhausted, the bruise under her eye poorly concealed with makeup. A bruise I hadn't noticed in yesterday's dim lighting. Elena, please don't make trouble. We manage fine. He hits you. It wasn't a question. Her silence was confirmation enough. I pulled out my laptop, showing her everything, the forged documents, the stolen equity, the systematic selling of Dad's possessions. Her face crumpled as the reality hit. Mason said he was helping, she whispered. Said the paperwork was too complicated for me to understand. They're stealing from you, Mom, from us, from Dad's legacy. But if you pursue this, Troy will go to jail, Mason too. But first, I need you to make a choice. Either you cooperate with the legal process, or you watch the house go into foreclosure because of the fraudulent loans they took out. Those loans are in your name too, Mom. You could lose everything. She broke down completely then, and I held her while she sobbed out the truth. The escalating violence, the threats, the isolation from family and friends. The classic abuse pattern I'd studied but never imagined would trap my own mother. There's another document, she said finally, voice barely audible. From 2010. You did sign something. Dad had you sign a co-ownership agreement when you turned 21. Said it would protect the house if anything happened to him. Mason doesn't know about it. It's in Dad's old safety deposit box at First National. I kept paying for it all these years, told Troy it was for my mother's jewelry. My heart raced. This was the smoking gun. Mom, listen carefully. I'm going to help you file for divorce and a restraining order today. Right now. Then we're going to the bank. I can't. Yes, you can, because I found something else. I showed her my phone. Security footage from Willow Ridge Elementary, 2 nights ago. Troy, drunk, vandalizing the playground, The principal already knows. You're going to lose your job if you stay with him." She stared at the grainy video of Troy spray painting obscenities on the school wall. "How did you—" "I'm a forensic investigator. Mom, this is what I do. Now, are you ready to fight back?" She nodded, straightening her shoulders in a way I hadn't seen in years. By noon, we'd filed the paperwork: divorce petition, restraining order, and most importantly, we'd retrieved the original 2010 document from the bank. It was everything I needed: clear joint ownership with explicit terms, no sale, transfer, or encumbrance without both signatures, notarized in person, with photo identification. Mason's house of cards was about to collapse, and I was going to be there to watch every piece fall. Judge Harrison reviewed the emergency filing with the kind of careful attention that comes from 30 years on the bench. Avery Sloan stood beside me in the courthouse, his presence lending weight to our petition. At 71, the old lawyer still commanded respect in Willow Ridge. "Miss Harper," the judge said, looking over his glasses, "you're requesting immediate injunctive relief, a property freeze, asset inventory authorization, and a protective order. That's quite a list." "Your Honor, we have clear evidence of ongoing fraud and documented domestic violence. Every day that passes, more assets disappear. Mr. Benton sold 3 antique tools on Facebook Marketplace just this morning, despite being served with notice yesterday." I presented the screenshots, time-stamped at 7:43 a.m., showing Troy's posts. The judge's expression hardened. "Mr. Sloan, you've reviewed all documentation." "Extensively, Your Honor. The 2010 co-ownership agreement is ironclad. Every subsequent transaction was fraudulent. The notary whose stamp appears on the power of attorney has provided an affidavit confirming she was out of state during the alleged signing. Granted." The gavel came down sharp. "Sheriff's Department will accompany Miss Harper for property inventory today at 3 p.m. Mr. Benton is prohibited from removing any items from the premises. The protective order is in effect immediately." 2 hours later, I stood in my childhood home's driveway with Deputy Williams and Deputy Chin. No relation, despite the name, watching Troy's face turn purple with rage. "You can't do this. This is my house." Deputy Williams, a mountain of a man who'd gone to high school with me, held up the court order. "Sir, step aside. Miss Harper has legal authorization to inventory all property. Every damn thing in there was paid for by me." Really, I pulled out my tablet, scrolling through bank records. The dining set purchased October 2009, the leather couch from 2011, the grandfather clock that's been in my family since 1952. Troy lunged forward but stopped when Deputy Williams stepped between us. "Sir, you're already in violation of a protective order by being within 50 feet of Miss Harper. Would you like to add a rest to your problems inside?" I documented everything with methodical precision. Every missing item cross-referenced against old insurance photos. Every new purchase traced through credit card records. The deputies took notes as Troy, forced to watch from the street, shouted increasingly creative obscenities. Then he said it, loud enough for the body cameras to capture. "Doesn't matter. Already sold all the old man's crap. Try finding it now." I smiled, pulling out my phone to text Avery. Troy had just confessed to theft on camera. Mason arrived 20 minutes later in his decade-old Lexus, trying to project success he didn't have. His face went pale when he saw the deputies. "What's the meaning of this?" Avery emerged from his car, serving Mason personally. "Mr. Kincaid, you're being formally notified of impending criminal charges for notary fraud and fraudulent transfer of property. The district attorney has been provided with comprehensive evidence." "This is ridiculous. I helped my sister with the notary stamp you used," I interrupted, "belongs to Patricia Henley. She's already given a sworn statement that she never notarized your documents. The timestamp on the electronic filing shows 11:37 p.m. on March 15th. Patricia's credit card shows her at a restaurant in Orlando at that exact time. Mason's lawyer shopping started that afternoon. By evening, 3 attorneys had already declined to represent him after reviewing the evidence. The house was sealed with official tape, inventory complete, The sheriff's department had documented over $200,000 in stolen and sold property. Mom was safe in a women's shelter, she'd insisted, wanting to do things properly. That night, I sat in Avery's office as we built the criminal case. The county prosecutor, Janet Martinez, had joined us after reviewing our filing. "This is one of the clearest cases of elder financial abuse and fraud I've seen," she said. "The pattern, the documentation, Mr. Kincaid and Mr. Benton are looking at significant prison time. Troy Benton also has 2 prior convictions for assault," Deputy Williams added, having joined our meeting. "This violates his probation from a bar fight 3 years ago." Everything was falling into place. The inventory revealed Troy had hidden cash in the garage, likely from his underground auto work. The serial numbers on several tools in his workshop matched items reported stolen from a construction site. "We're adding possession of stolen property to the charges," Martinez announced. As I left the courthouse at 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Mason, probably on a burner phone. "We need to talk." "This has gone too far." I forwarded it to Martinez immediately. Attempted witness intimidation, another charge for the pile. The foundations were crumbling beneath their feet, and tomorrow, I'd make sure they lost everything they'd stolen. Mason's counterattack came through Bradley Thornton, a bottom-feeder lawyer known for taking cases nobody else would touch. The cease and desist letter arrived at my motel at 7 a.m., thick with legal threats and accusations of defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I actually laughed, forwarding it immediately to Avery with a single word: desperate. The letter claimed I was a gold digger trying to steal from her elderly mother and threatened a civil suit for damages. Mason was trying to control the narrative, but he'd made a critical mistake. He'd put his lies in writing. I spent the morning composing my own narrative, but mine came with receipts. I drafted emails to every family member, Dad's Army unit friends, and the church Mom attended before Troy isolated her. Each message contained the facts, documented evidence of fraud, photos of the forged signatures, and the court orders already in place. "Dear friends and family," I wrote, "some of you may hear claims that I'm trying to take advantage of my mother. Here's the truth. With documentation attached, Mason Kincaid forged signatures to steal my father's house. Troy Benton has been arrested for domestic violence. Every claim I make is backed by evidence, which will be presented in court." The responses flooded in within hours. Jim Rodriguez and Mike Patterson, Dad's Army buddies, drove down from Kansas City immediately. They brought something that made me cry: Dad's Purple Heart and Bronze Star, still in their cases. "Bought these back from a pawn shop in Jefferson City," Jim said, his jaw tight with anger. "Traced them through the serial numbers. Cost me $3,000, but I couldn't let them stay there. Send me the receipts," I said. "You'll get every penny back, with interest." Mike pulled out his phone, showing me photos. "Found your dad's custom knife collection listed on an auction site. Screen grabbed everything before it sold. The buyer's username traces back to a shop in Columbia. These men, in their 60s now, had spent days tracking down my father's legacy. The knife alone was worth $8,000, a custom piece Dad had commissioned from a master craftsman. Mason's next move was more desperate: a smear campaign on social media. His daughter, Brittany, started posting about her cruel cousin trying to make her family homeless. She claimed I was jealous of their success, that I'd abandoned my family and only returned for money. Perfect. Defamation in writing, posted publicly. I screenshot everything, then responded with a single post of my own, the forged power of attorney next to Patricia Henley's affidavit, with the caption, "Facts versus Fiction." Mom called that afternoon, voice stronger than I'd heard in years. "Elena, I'm filing my own charges. The shelter helped me document everything: bruises, threats, financial abuse. Troy's been stealing my Social Security checks." "Good. Did you sign the divorce papers?" "This morning. And honey, I remembered something. There's a storage unit. Troy doesn't know about it. I've been paying cash for 5 years, hiding Dad's important things. Unit 47 at Secure Store on Highway 12. My hands shook as I drove there. Inside the climate-controlled unit, Dad's military dress uniform, his service records, photo albums, and boxes of documents including receipts for every tool in his collection, photos of every piece of furniture, appraisals for the antiques. But the real treasure was a notebook in Dad's handwriting, for Elena if something happens to me. Page after page documenting his assets, serial numbers, provenance for family heirlooms, and a note: Mason's always been greedy. Never let him near the house papers. Trust Avery Sloane. Dad had seen this coming. That evening, Troy made his stupidest move yet. Despite the restraining order, he showed up at the elementary school where Mom worked, drunk and belligerent. The security footage captured him screaming about that bitch daughter and threatening to burn the house down before letting me have it. The principal called the police immediately. Troy was arrested on school property at 4:20 p.m., violating his protective order, probation, and adding criminal threats to his charges. The bail was set at $75,000 money he didn't have. Mason tried one last play, calling Mom's phone from his burner. I was with her and recorded everything. Marlene, we can work this out. Just tell Elena to back off. I'll give you $20,000 cash to make this go away. That's bribery and witness tampering, I said clearly. This is Elena Harper. This call is being recorded. The line went dead. Prosecutor Martinez was ecstatic. He just added 2 more felonies to his case. Mr. Kincaid is looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had been doused in gasoline and set ablaze. I sent a final email to Brittany. Your father has 72 hours to return every penny he stole, plus my legal fees, or the criminal trial proceeds. After that, no deals. The response came in 12 hours. Mason wanted to negotiate. The meeting took place in Thornton's cramped office at 10 a.m. sharp. Mason sat across from me, his cheap cologne failing to mask the smell of flop sweat. His lawyer shuffled papers nervously while Avery sat beside me, calm as a frozen lake. I didn't wait for pleasantries. Here's what's going to happen. Mason, you're going to sign over every claim to the house. You're going to pay back the $48,000 from the fraudulent HELOC, plus $32,000 in legal fees and damages. You're going to provide a written confession of the forgery. That's extortion, Thornton started. No, I interrupted, pulling out my tablet. This is evidence. March 15th, 11:37 p.m. You filed documents with a forged notary seal. March 16th, 2:14 a.m. You accessed Mom's bank account using credentials you stole. March 17th, you transferred $20,000 to your business account, Kincaid Family Solutions LLC, which, by the way, has been flagged by the IRS for tax evasion. Mason's face went gray. How did you, April through September, you sold items totaling $93,000 in value for less than $12,000 cash. Here are the receipts, the buyer information, and photos of you at the pawn shops. I swiped through security footage. October 2nd, 9:43 p.m. Attempted witness tampering via phone. October 3rd, 4:17 a.m. You accessed Mom's email to delete bank notifications. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow. I'd spent years perfecting this, building airtight cases that left no room for escape. Your Honor, Avery said calmly, though we weren't in court. My client is offering a gift. Sign the agreement or face 20 years in federal prison. The FBI is particularly interested in the interstate fraud charges, since several items were sold across state lines using false representations. FBI, Mason's voice cracked. I smiled, cold and sharp. Did you really think I worked in forensic compliance for 10 years without making federal contacts? Agent Rivera is waiting for my call. One word from me, and this becomes a federal case. Thornton whispered urgently in Mason's ear. Mason shook his head, then whispered back. They went back and forth for 3 minutes before Thornton spoke. My client wants to negotiate the amount. No. I stood up. Full restitution plus fees, or I call Rivera now. You have 60 seconds. I pulled out my phone. Agent Rivera's number already on screen. I started counting down on my watch. At 42 seconds. Mason cracked. Fine, I'll sign everything. Good choice. I sat back down, pulling out the prepared documents. Sign here, initial here, and here. This confession will be filed with the court. Any attempt to retract it will trigger immediate federal prosecution. Mason's hand shook as he signed. When he reached the confession page, detailing every fraudulent act, he paused. This will ruin me. You ruined yourself the moment you forged that first signature, I replied. I'm just documenting it. He signed. Thornton notarized it properly. With actual identification verified, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The money, I continued, will be transferred within 72 hours. I've frozen your accounts through civil asset forfeiture proceedings, so I know you have it. Your house in Riverside, the one you bought with stolen money, has a lien now. Sell it. Liquidate your fake business. Do whatever you need. 72 hours? Mason stood to leave, then turned back, his mask finally dropping. Your father would be ashamed of you. I laughed genuine, bitter amusement. My father left a notebook warning me about you. Quote, Mason's greed will be his downfall. Protect what I've built. So actually, he'd be proud. After they left, Avery patted my shoulder. That was masterful. We're not done. Troy's still in jail, and I want him to stay there. That afternoon, Mom signed the papers Avery prepared. The house would return to my name alone. With a life estate for Mom, she could live there as long as she wanted, but couldn't sell or borrow against it without court approval. It protected her from future predators while ensuring Dad's legacy remained intact. The prosecutor called at 6 p.m. Troy took a plea deal. 3 years for assault, 2 for theft, consecutive. With his priors, he'll serve at least 4. 4 years. Not enough for what he'd done to Mom, but enough to keep her safe while she rebuilt her life. That evening, I sat in Dad's workshop, now empty but still smelling of sawdust and possibility. Mom joined me, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have been stronger. You survived, I told her. That took all the strength you had. Now we rebuild. Mason's money came through in 41 hours wire transfer from the sale of his boat and motorcycle, every penny accounted for. The prosecutor agreed to recommend probation with restitution completed, but Mason would still carry the felony conviction. His real estate license was revoked, his reputation destroyed. Sometimes justice isn't about prison. Sometimes it's about taking back everything they stole, piece by piece, until they're left with nothing but the consequences of their choices. The courtroom was packed at 9 a.m. sharp. Troy sat in orange jumpsuit and shackles, his public defender looking exhausted. Mason stood separately with Thornton, wearing his last decent suit. Judge Harrison presided again, his expression stern as he reviewed the plea agreements. Mr. Benton, the judge began, you're pleading guilty to assault in the 2nd degree, theft by deception, and violation of a protective order. The agreement recommends 5 years with possibility of parole after 3. Do you understand? Troy's jaw clenched. Yeah. Yes, Your Honor, his lawyer whispered urgently. Yes, Your Honor, Troy mumbled. The judge turned to the victim impact statement. Mom stood, voice trembling but determined. Troy Benton stole more than money. He stole my peace, my safety, my connection to my late husband's memory. He sold items that can never be replaced, not for their monetary value, but for what they meant to our family. I request the maximum sentence allowed. Judge Harrison nodded, then looked at me. Miss Harper. I stood. Your Honor, Troy Benton and Mason Kincaid conspired to defraud an elderly widow. They used violence and intimidation. Troy admitted on camera to selling my father's possessions out of spite. I asked the court to consider the calculated nature of these crimes. The judge's gavel came down. Troy Benton, I sentence you to 5 years, eligible for parole after 4. You will pay restitution of $93,000 to the Harper estate. Your assets will be liquidated to meet this obligation. The bailiff moved toward Troy, who suddenly erupted. "This is bullshit. That house is mine. I earned it. Remove him," Judge Harrison ordered. As they dragged Troy out, he screamed at me, "You think you won? You're nothing, just like your dead father." The courtroom gasped. Judge Harrison's face darkened. "Bring him back!" Troy was hauled back, still struggling. "For contempt of court and threatening behavior, I'm adding 6 months, 5.5 years total. No possibility of early release for 4.5 years. Troy finally went silent. The reality sinking in. Mason's turn came next. His plea deal negotiated after my evidence made conviction certain included probation, full restitution, and 300 hours of community service. But the judge had other ideas. "Mr. Kincaid, you betrayed family trust. You used your knowledge and position to prey on your sister during her vulnerability. While the prosecutor recommends probation, I'm invoking judicial discretion. 18 months imprisonment, followed by 3 years probation. Restitution stands at $80,000. Mason swayed on his feet. But my lawyer said, "Your lawyer negotiated with the prosecutor, not with me. I've reviewed the evidence Miss Harper provided, the calculated nature of your fraud, the abuse of notary powers, the exploitation of family trust. These factors warrant incarceration." Thornton objected frantically, but Judge Harrison was unmoved. The gavel fell with finality. I watched the bailiff approach Mason with handcuffs. His hands shook as metal clicked around his wrists, the same hands that had forged signatures, stolen inheritances, destroyed trust. "Your Honor," Prosecutor Martinez stood. "There's the matter of property restoration." Judge Harrison nodded. "All property transfers executed by Mason Kincaid regarding the Harper estate are hereby void. The deed returns to Elena Harper as sole owner, per the original 2010 documentation. The court orders immediate enforcement." He turned to me. "Miss Harper, you'll have full access to the property within 24 hours. The Sheriff's Department will oversee the removal of any remaining possessions belonging to Mr. Benton." As Mason was led away, he turned to look at me one last time. No words, just the hollow stare of a man who'd gambled everything and lost. Outside the courthouse, Mom clutched my arm. "It's over." "Almost," I said, pulling out the new keys I'd had made. "One more thing to do." That afternoon, we returned to the house with Darius Cole and his crew. While they worked to restore what Troy had damaged, I led Mom to the basement. Using Dad's old drawings found in the storage unit, we located the exact spot, 3 feet behind the water heater, concealed by a panel that looked like foundation wall. We found it, the hidden compartment Dad had built, his final secret. Inside his original Army discharge papers, grandmother's jewelry we thought was lost, and an envelope addressed to me in his handwriting. "My dearest Elena," it read. "If you're reading this, then you've had to fight for what's yours. I'm sorry for that burden, but I knew you'd win. You have the Harper spirit we don't give up. We don't give in, and we always protect our own. The house is more than wood and stone. It's our history, our strength, our defiance against those who would take what we've earned. Guard it well. Love always. Dad." Below that, a postscript, P.S. Never trust Mason. The combination to the safe behind this panel is your birthday backwards. I worked the combination on the small safe I hadn't even noticed. Inside $20,000 in cash and gold coins worth another $30,000. He knew, Mom whispered. He knew this might happen. He knew Mason, I corrected, and he knew I'd come back to make it right. The courthouse called an hour later. Mason had tried to appeal the sentence immediately. Denied. He'd serve every day of those 18 months. The civil enforcement came swift and brutal. Mason's accounts were frozen at 9 a.m. Monday morning. By noon, the Sheriff's Department had placed liens on his house, his struggling real estate office, and the vintage Corvette he'd bought with Dad's money. Every asset cataloged, tagged, and scheduled for auction. I stood in the district courthouse, watching the monitor display Mason's possessions being inventoried. His daughter Brittany was there, crying and cursing my name. But the evidence was undeniable. The receipts I'd provided showed clear trails Dad's tools sold, money deposited, luxury items purchased. "Miss Harper," the clerk called. "The deed transfer is complete. You're now the sole owner of 1847 Willow Ridge Drive." I held the paper my name alone where it should have always been. The document included new provisions, no liens, no transfers, no modifications without court approval, and my notarized signature in person. Ironclad protection Mom and I had needed years ago. Back at the house, Darius and his crew had worked miracles. The scratched floors were refinished, the walls repainted, Dad's workshop reorganized with new tools I'd purchased to replace what was stolen. Above the workbench, I hung his Purple Heart and Bronze Star, returned home where they belonged. Mom stood in the kitchen, finally looking like herself again. The divorce was final, the restraining order permanent. She'd started therapy, joined a support group, even laughed yesterday, really laughed for the first time in years. "Elena," she said, pulling something from a drawer. "I found this in Troy's things when the deputies cleared out his stuff. It was Dad's wedding ring. The one Troy claimed was lost. I slipped it onto my thumb, feeling its weight. Another piece recovered." The next morning brought the final vindication. Prosecutor Martinez called with news that made me sink into Dad's old leather chair, one of the few pieces Troy hadn't managed to sell. "Mason cracked completely," she said. "He's provided evidence of 6 other families he's defrauded over the years. Similar schemes, elderly relatives, forged documents, property theft. The FBI is taking over. He's looking at 20 to 30 years federal time now." 20 to 30 years. He'd die in prison. That afternoon, I stood in Dad's workshop with the last box from the storage unit. Inside were his woodworking journals, decades of notes and sketches. The final entry, dated a week before his death, made my throat tight. "Teaching Elena to use the lathe today. She has good hands, steady and sure. She'll protect what matters. That's what Harpers do." I ran my fingers over his handwriting, then noticed something else, a hidden compartment in the box bottom. Inside was a USB drive wrapped in plastic. The drive contained everything scanned documents, photos of every valuable item, recordings of conversations with Mason where Dad expressed concerns about his intentions. The metadata showed Dad had updated it just days before his sudden heart attack. He'd known. He'd prepared. He'd trusted me to finish what he couldn't. I opened the safe behind the panel one more time, placing the USB inside along with all the court documents, the verdicts, the restored deed, evidence of justice served, preserved for the future. As I worked, I found one last note tucked behind the safe. So old, the paper had yellowed, "Elena, final lesson." Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's taking back what's yours and building something better from the ruins they created. Make me proud, Dad. I looked around the workshop, at Mom humming in the kitchen, at the house restored to what it should be. Troy would spend 4.5 years learning what consequences meant. Mason would die behind federal bars. The extended family who'd sided with them had gone silent, shamed by the evidence I'd made public. But more importantly, Mom was free. The house was ours. Dad's legacy was protected. I picked up one of the new chisels, feeling its weight, and started carving into a piece of oak. Just simple practice cuts at first, then slowly forming letters, Harper. Our name, our house, our victory. The investigation skills I'd honed in Seattle had saved my family's legacy. Every document cataloged, every lie exposed, every piece of evidence preserved. They'd thought I was just a girl who'd abandoned her roots. They'd learned I was my father's daughter patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when protecting what mattered. I finished the carving and hung it above the workshop door. Tomorrow, Darius would start teaching me Dad's woodworking techniques. Mom had enrolled in community college, finally pursuing the degree Troy had forbidden. The house would echo with life again, not fear. Justice had been served cold, calculated, and complete. Dad was right. The best revenge was taking back what was mine and building something better. the Harper house stood strong, and it always would. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to hear what you think about Elena's fight for justice.